We are on.
So today we have with us Kat McGhee, a member of the New Hampshire House of Representatives and member of the Science, Technology, and Energy Committee of the House. Kat chaired the Hollis Pipeline Impact Study Task Force for the Hollis Selectmen during the proposed Kinder Morgan Pipeline project. She also represented the town of Hollis on the Nashua Regional Planning Commission's Energy Facility Advisory Committee and helped co-found the web-based organization known as the New Hampshire Pipeline Awareness.org. She's married to John McGhee and has 4 grown children, 9 grandchildren, and 1 great-grandchild. Oh my goodness. And she sang professionally throughout the 70s, 80s, and 90s, and hopefully she'll sing for us today. So welcome, Kat. We're also pleased to have with us today Don Kreis, the Consumer Advocate of the New Hampshire Office of the Consumer Advocate. As Consumer Advocate, Don is tasked with representing the interests of the Granite State's residential utility customers at the New Hampshire Public Utilities Commission and elsewhere. Outside of the office, he is the chair of the Board of Trustees of We Own It, a nonprofit dedicated to the reform of cooperatives, and that strikes right to my heart as a former chairman of the New Hampshire Electric Cooperative. Go Don. He serves also on the board of the Northern New England chapter of the Cystic Fibrosis Foundation and is also a columnist on the news site indepthnewhampshire.org. And if you follow indepthnewhampshire.org, I'm always looking forward to his columns. Always good stuff. Last but not least, we have Bob Backus, who is now retired from the law firm of Backus, Meyer and Branch. And Bob is the former chairman of the New Hampshire House Science, Technology, and Energy Committee. So we welcome Bob. Bob, if you have anything else to add to your CV in terms of background, could you tell us that?
Go ahead. No, that's fine, Joe. I have a long history on energy policy in the state, as many of you know, and I'm so pleased to see this organization come together and see so many of my colleagues now previously serving on the committee with me as part of it. So I'm looking forward to it.
Great. Glad to have you with us. And thank you all for agreeing to be with us this morning. Before we start our conversation, I ask that all summit attendees mute your computer and put your screens on speaker view. If you have any questions for the panel, please pose them on chat, and we will do our best to bring those to the panel. I'll pose some questions to the panel and ask each panelist to give their thoughts on the question, and I will encourage debate among the panel. I'm sure we'll have a robust and interesting conversation. So it looks like with this group, we'll probably go till about 10:55, and let's start. Let's open the panel with the following question. I'll pose the first one. Why has New Hampshire consistently lagged behind the other New England states in the areas of energy efficiency, clean energy deployment, and carbon emissions reduction? Currently, New Hampshire is ranked 18th by the ACEEE and behind all the other New England states. Just our neighbor to the south, Massachusetts, is number 2 on that list. And we're also finding that in the last year, our triennial energy efficiency plan, which was due to be approved by the PUC in January, was sidelined and has been delayed. And now we're learning that the PUC is reopening the docket on that energy efficiency plan, likely further delaying the implementation of that plan. So this probably goes right to the heart of some of the things that Don Kreis has been doing. So Don, why don't we open it up for you and give us your thoughts on this perplexing question?
Ratepayer-funded energy efficiency, I think, is the most valuable thing that I can deliver to residential customers in my capacity as consumer advocate. So it's my top priority, and I fight like the dickens to try to make sure that we deliver as much of that as possible. And Joe, as you pointed out, that even though we're number 18 in the country, which puts us in the upper third of states, we are dead last in New England, and any state in a part of the country that is as cold as ours is and gets as hot in the summer and is as far away from sources of fossil fuel as we are, really needs to be extremely aggressive about energy efficiency. And it's really important and valuable because apart from the climate implications, it saves customers money in the long run. And yet there is a great deal of ideological opposition to energy efficiency. I got asked in the chat whether I consider it a subsidy, and I do consider it a subsidy. But the world of network service by utilities is rife with subsidies, and many of them are appropriate, and this one is. You suggested that the PUC has reopened its energy efficiency docket. That docket has been open all along. We were expecting a decision in December about the 3-year energy efficiency plan that was supposed to launch on January 1. And the PUC simply refused to take action all the way until September 1st, when they put out a very disturbing order suggesting that they were going to let the new PUC commissioner pose some questions, and then he would get to ask some more questions at a hearing. I am not sitting or standing for any of that, because as far as I'm concerned, as a matter of due process, we conducted a full-blown administrative hearing at the PUC. There was really no opposition among the parties to the energy efficiency plan. So as far as I'm concerned, as a matter of law, the ratepayers of this state are entitled to an order approving that plan. And if I don't get an order approving that plan, I intend to take this problem straight to the New Hampshire Supreme Court.
Thanks, Don. I'll be right there with you, in the Supreme Court. Kat, can we go to you? What are your thoughts on where we are in those three areas of clean energy, energy efficiency, and carbon reduction?
Well, I think if we relate back to the presentation we just had from Representative Bloom, she started off her presentation saying that they had referenced some of the good work that had been done in New Hampshire to launch where they went with their initiative in terms of looking at climate change and its effect to their coastlines. New Hampshire has a really strong history of pulling together almost always volunteer expertise onto committees and commissions in order to address larger systemic problems. And the same has been true for climate over the years. In the last 4 years, or basically the length of the current administration to 2017, I guess, we have taken a sharp turn away from following the plans that have been put in place in the past. We had some very good work done on climate planning, starting in the early 2000s, and then with a plan in 2009 and a plan in 2014, all of which were well done. And to Representative Bloom's point, states look at other states for, what's happening, how are we moving, what legislation will help us get where we want to go. We had systemic approaches. We had experts from different sectors contributing, and that's when New Hampshire does its best work. I can say that since I joined the legislature and started sitting on science, technology, and energy, we have been thwarted in those efforts. The governor, famously had 57 vetoes or so during the Democratic-led session. Many of those were climate bills. And some of the initiatives that Representative Bloom talked about folks taking in Maine, we had tried during the Democratic majority. We tried to get a bill that would have the New Hampshire fleet of vehicles converted on their regular transition schedule, right? So we're going to be spending money to replace vehicles anyway, let's make them electric. And we gave a 20-year period. So there really would be no significant economic impact. It would just be a smart thing to do, lead by example, convert your fleet between 2019 and 2039, vetoed. John Mann, who the folks who've served in the legislature in the past know quite well, he still sits on science, technology, and energy. Several of our Democratic colleagues did not make it because it was kind of a wave election in 2020. But John Mann has been dedicated to energy efficiency for his entire, career with the legislature. And in that same session, he put in HB 80. In this session, he put in HB 80, but there was a similar bill that was vetoed in the last session that basically said, we put $1 out of whatever whatever the amount of the payback is from Reggie for it's a cap and trade program, right? So the amount of the money that comes in changes. At the time that we had the last assessment, I think it was $7 or something, but they're only allowing $1 of that money, which is supposed to be dedicated for energy efficiency, to go to energy efficiency. So there's always a limitation on what we can do, what we can invest in, and how we can use that money. And that money has been growing. So in the last auction that they had, we were getting typically about $14 million at auction as a state from Reggie. And it was 21 million, but we still only get $1 that goes to energy efficiency. So there's not any systemic management of the resources coming into the state. There's just, as Don mentioned, an ideology that we don't want to spend any money. And so cut off your nose to spite your face. There will be no strategy. There will be no discussion about the cost benefit analysis of investing those dollars and getting 4 back for every one you spend. So we're not having the kind of healthy debate that you would have if we were all honest brokers trying to solve a problem. And that's been my sort of biggest disappointment in coming to work on this. I also wanted to say just one other thing about my bio. I was a professional singer, but I also was a program manager in software engineering, and the skills that I bring to science and tech have more to do with technology, and then a desire to make sure that we make good energy decisions so that our economy can move forward like everyone else's is going to. The chair of our committee told us this year in session, when we were trying again to move forward with allowing EV vehicles to come to dealerships in New Hampshire. We're the donut hole in New England. We don't allow that. That bill, second time, defeated a second time, came from Representative McWilliams from Concord, and she's a wonderful, she's an attorney as well as an architect, and she has been responsible for putting in housing bills that increase housing efficiency. And she's also been really forward on trying to get us transitioning in small ways to accepting electric vehicles and the electrification of the transportation sector. None of that has been allowed to go forward. So it's not for lack of trying. It's more that we actually need to have a majority in order to get anything done. And we need to change leadership at the top, because it's been a major impediment to, we don't have a strategy by design. That's the way I would say it. I'll just leave it at that.
Thanks, Kat. I just might add that our legislature essentially killed any involvement that our environmental agency will have in the Transportation Climate Initiative. And I use the old analogy that if you're not at the table, you're on the menu. And I think like the Reggie developments, if New Hampshire hadn't been at the table, New Hampshire probably would have gotten a much leaner share of the auction proceeds under Reggie. Also, I'm just surprised that our legislature's conservative bent. They should be concerned about the economics. Everything that they have turned down in terms of moving towards more energy efficiency, climate change, clean energy, would make us more competitive with our other New England sister states. And what they've done is made us less competitive. So I'd like to move on to Bob. Bob, what are your thoughts on this question about energy efficiency, clean energy, and carbon emissions?
Oh, thanks, Joe, and thanks for including me on this panel. I'd like to really acknowledge the excellent work that, well, Kat's doing, and especially and equally, I would say, Don Kreis. As he mentioned, there was a settlement agreement approved by all the parties to the docket to move forward with an increase in our goals for energy efficiency. And when there's a settlement agreement, it's normally pretty pro forma. Well, I didn't say pro forma, but it normally occurs that the commission's going to approve it and not go to a contested hearing. And Don pulled together every stakeholder in this, including representative of all the 4 incumbent utilities, the environmental organizations, even the Business and Industry Association, which has since changed its mind. And they came up with this agreement and presented to the commission. The commission decided it by not deciding it. So that's just dreadful, and it's through no lack of skilled work on behalf of our able consumer advocate. Now, many years ago, when I was involved in the fight over the licensing of Seabrook, there was a National Geographic article specifically on New Hampshire, and I worked with the authors on part of it because they did deal with the Seabrook issue. And the subtitle of that article was New Hampshire Contrarian. I always thought it was a pretty good description of our state, the contrarian state. And I just don't understand really why we're not willing to move forward on this. I do have a suggestion, though, and I've made this, many people have heard me say this before. In New Hampshire, everybody talks about the electric rates are too high. Well, it turns out the electric rates in New Hampshire are not extremely high compared to the rest of New England. They're sort of in the middle, maybe just below the middle of the average for the New England states, which is the real relevant comparison. Of course, they're somewhat higher than many other parts of the state. We don't have a TVA up here, for example, to provide hydropower without having to pay anybody dividends for doing it and not having to pay taxes. We don't have that. We do have, Joe, as you know, a very fine electric cooperative. But I think, and I've mentioned this many times, I'm going to have to mention again, I think the language you use is very, very important. In this state, we've got used to talking about electric ratepayers. We have to protect electric ratepayers from higher electric rates. Well, we really don't, because people don't pay rates, they pay bills. And it just bothers me that in our language, we always refer to ratepayers, and then the opposition party tends to think that any increase authorized by the government, whether it funds the operations of government or some other purpose, can be called a tax. So they get into that language. And I think if we can begin to think about every time we hear a discussion about this, well, wait a minute, we don't really care about the rates, do we, if our bills are lower? And how do we get our bills lower? Well, as Don Kreis so ably advocates, and Kat too, and many others of you get them lower by reducing your usage, not by doing without, not by, freezing in the winter, or, not using air conditioning in the summer. You get at it by using more efficiency. And we've got a lot of that to be developed. And every dollar, I've seen studies that suggest every dollar you put in energy efficiency has a $4 or $5 return value. And it usually comes about quite quickly. So, that's just my suggestion. We all try and remember and get that discussion going with people. Because when people hear that, they say, yeah, that's right. I don't pay rates. I pay a bill. I would like my bill to be lower, and I won't care that much if my rate's up, if my bill goes down, because I'm using electricity, because we had robust energy efficiency programs. Well, that's my thought on that.
Thank you, Don. I'm also, having been on the board of the New Hampshire Electric Co-op, even with the co-op, it was difficult to get staff to think about what's a concept called on-bill financing, where it's a pay-as-you-save account. So where the utility or state government would actually finance the energy efficiency improvements, and those improvements would be paid back to the funding party on a lowered electric bill each month. And it seemed like a great promise and premise, but we can't seem to get that happening in the state either. But okay, thanks. Appreciate it very much, Bob. Moving on, another question I've got. How can we as citizens in New Hampshire contribute to making up some of these gaps in performance? What can we actually do, given the state of the legislature and the governor's office and the executive council? So let's start with Kat this time.
Yeah, I am a person who really looked forward to working across the aisle. And I know in my town, we're all the jobs in the town, all the volunteer boards, the board of selectmen, they're nonpartisan jobs, right? No one asks you what your politics are. You step up and serve as a citizen. And I expected a similar experience going into the legislature. But at this point, I think we have to vote the bums out because we have a party that is not operating always in good faith. And I actually, I brought this up because one of the reasons I wanted to serve was really not to serve a party or an ideology, but I want to get things done. I thought I could help. I thought I had skills that could help make things easier for people to understand things that are complex. I thought some of the skills that I have would be useful. And what I'm finding is that this recalcitrance and this head in the sand kind of position that electric vehicles are a fad, or climate change isn't real. It's so pervasive that it's very hard to find partners, and for even the small things, let alone to get anything strategic happening at a time when we're behind on getting that strategy in place. So we have had bills that have asked for climate planning, climate targets, and they've all been shelved and killed. And then the smaller pieces that we're trying to do, whether they're around energy efficiency. For example, we did pass the Community Power Bill, HB 315. Wonderful. We also had SB 91. They moved the ball along statutorily. But what is happening also legislatively under the majority that's in now, the GOP-led majority, is that there are bills being passed that also punch holes in the strategies that those bills support. So my community power the Hollis Energy Committee, so the town committee on energy in my town, had a meeting Thursday night to inform the public about community power. We're planning to join the Community Power Coalition. We've always been very forward on our planning in town. And two things directly affect us, two important things. One is a bill that's advancing, that was advancing. We actually did just kill it in subcommittee the other day, thank goodness. We got Troy Murner, who some of you know, who oftentimes will, if it's good for the North Country, he is a Republican that will cross the aisle in his vote. We had a bill that took away useful thermal credits, and our town converted multiple town buildings to pellet from oil. And so, people are making real investments around the state based on advances that we've made in the past. And these folks are like arsonists. They're taking away how the system is intended to work, so it breaks. So that the clean energy economy in terms of jobs, companies, support for like ultra geothermal is our largest ground source heat company in the state. They should be booming at this point. They're having trouble finding people, hiring people, training people, keeping people, and also servicing the customers that they already have. We're among their customers. So what we have to understand is that if we want any type of strategy, we have to change not only the leadership in the governor's office, we have to just change it all the way down, because we're not going, and I'm not saying that because of my political leanings. I'm saying that because the results that you get, you won't get the results. And the one other bill that I wanted to mention is, I was on the subcommittee that killed the useful thermal credits bill that would be damaging. But then I went downstairs to Ways and Means because they had two of our other bills that were being heard, and our Chairman Vos, was presenting them. And the first one was, and he had an amendment that no one had seen that passed in Ways and Means because they want to defer to him as the leader of science, technology, and energy. The bill had originally been that municipalities can opt out of paying compliance with the renewable portfolio standard. And that money from municipalities goes to support the renewable portfolio standard. So that means when folks want to apply for grants, there's money available. So the opt-out was, scary because it means that a lot of people would be taking their ball and going home at a time when, money is drying up for doing the things we want to do. So it's kind of a starve the beast strategy. And that amendment that he brought in changed it from opt-out to opt-in, which is even worse because it means everybody is going to stop paying unless they decide that they want to pay for it, which is pretty bad. So I think it's very difficult to explain to people how much destructive work is going on to the building blocks that we've already put in place. But I am anticipating, and I haven't gone into bill review because yesterday was we had 1 week to put bills in. I don't think folks on our committee have been very ambitious in what we've filed because we know what we're up against. But I am concerned that next year is going to be even worse. It sounds pretty bleak, and I don't, but I guess my answer is elections have consequences. It matters who you put in charge. You will not get the solutions that you are seeking if you don't work to change the leadership and the majorities so that we can pass the legislation we need to move forward. And also, one last thing I'll say, I've been very involved in framing and messaging, and Bob just mentioned, how we talk about things and how we lose that battle often. That is one thing I hope that this network would be able to do as an echo chamber, is that we could figure out perhaps some framing and messaging on the destruction that's happening. We need to let the public understand that what's happening isn't good for the state or good for the environment or good for the economy. Those are messages that resonate, but people are not aware. And that's one of the reasons that I was hoping that this group could be formed and could be utilized, is to relay those messages down to communities. Because I think there's going to be a wave the next way in 2022, but only if we, let people know.
Thanks, Kat. One observation I had was this past session of the legislature, I went into it very pessimistic that we're going to have any success, but I think we had some successes. House Bill 315 started as a very regressive community power bill, ended up being actually a very positive power bill due to the pressure from outside folks, and so that was good. We also saw a lot of I'll call them stinky bills that ended up being retained in committee or outright killed. So I think we had some success, but we also had some failures. But I think we did better than I thought we would last year. But I'm keeping my fingers crossed for this session of the legislature. Bob, can we go to you? What are your thoughts on how citizens can actually make up for these gaps in our performance of energy efficiency, climate change, carbon emissions reduction?
Well, these are all very important things. And as Kat mentioned, I think one of the things that happened in the default of state leadership on this at the highest levels, we did with some, you mentioned it, Joe, House Bill 315, where I think Cliff Below was really key into getting Chairman Vos to change that bill into something that enabled our municipalities to move forward. And that's where it's got to be done until we have until we get back, frankly, a better House and even a better Senate, and may I say somebody different in the corner office as well. And it's really exciting to see the number of communities that are grabbing onto this as a way to enable you to do this at the municipal level. So I think that's very important. And the other thing is, I just saw the post from Howard Moffett on the chat, and I certainly agree. We've got to have better results in our elections if we're going to have better results in our energy policy. New Hampshire. I was inquiring at the EC board meeting about the status of RGGI, which is turned out to be, I guess, one of the first cap and trade programs. It's a way to address climate pollution, nothing like what John Gage wants to do, which would be far more efficient carbon fee and dividend, but it is a way to move forward. The thing has been expanding with new states joining it, not just the original 9. And what do we got in New Hampshire? We've got a conditional repeal. If one of the other major New England states dropped out, then we would automatically drop out, even though we know that if we dropped out, we would still have to pay some of the cost to run the system, but we'd get none of the benefits. But we still have to, hang on by the skin of our teeth just to save that program, modest as it is. So we certainly need to get strong candidates. I hope some of the people here will become candidates and run and help us change things.
Thanks, Bob. Yeah, absolutely. We're finding ourselves in a situation where we really do need to really improve the candidate pool going into the selections in 2022. Don, can I turn to you now on this particular question?
Yes, you can.
Thank you.
I'm a state employee, and for that and other reasons, I have to be really careful about how I answer a question like this. I do not disdain partisan politics at all. It has a vital role to play in our polity, but I kind of have to be adjacent to partisan politics, not part of it. I try to maintain excellent relations with folks in both caucuses. I consider Michael Vose, who is Bob Backus's successor as chair of the House Science, Tech, and Energy Committee, to be a friend. And so I'm going to try to be really measured. One of the things that Kat McGhee didn't say about herself is that she is a remarkably skilled legislator. Just like Representative Vose is. Representative Vose, I've watched him for quite a few years now. He plays the legislative game to win. And on the Democratic side of the House ST&E committee, you have 4 really remarkable women currently serving on that committee. You have Kat McGhee, you have Lee Oxenham, you have Rebecca McWilliams, who I know is here, and you also have Representative Cretion, and I think they've been marginalized in a way that I find worrisome and disturbing. So, uh, Jackie Cretion, I spaced on her first name temporarily. Um, I guess my message is that it is important not just to elect people who have the policy preferences that you care about. It's important to elect and empower people who are going to go to the State House in Concord and play the game to win. If you want your policy objectives to actually become enshrined in bills that get to the governor for his signature or veto, that's vitally important. Uh, the other answer I have to this question of, well, what can citizens do is citizens can participate in proceedings before the Public Utilities Commission right alongside me. There was a question in the chat from John Chafee about forcing the PUC to consider environmental impacts of its decisions. And his question was, well, could we have a bill that says, hey, PUC, you have to do that? And my answer is the PUC already has to do that. As John will remember from a few years ago, the PUC made a decision that had to do with the request of Liberty Utilities to expand its natural gas franchise territory into the Upper Valley. And it said in its decision, well, we're not an environmental regulator. We don't think about that. We don't care about that. It's none of our business. Well, in my opinion, and I am a lawyer, and I used to be the general counsel of the PUC, that was legal error. And somebody could make that argument again in an appropriate case at the PUC, and then appeal that to the New Hampshire Supreme Court, and I think they'd have a good shot at winning. And then here's my last point, and here is where I might annoy some of you. I think too much time has been spent and too much blood and ink have been spilled over the last 5 years about net metering. The solar industry, for obvious reasons, thinks net metering is the most important thing that any of us can do. But from my standpoint as the state's ratepayer advocate, it is not in first place, not in second place. It might be in about fourth place when it comes to priorities about making our utility or our energy use better, more reliable, cheaper, and having fewer environmental externalities. So, as I said earlier, energy efficiency, I think, is the most important thing. Negawatts have almost no, in fact, virtually no carbon impacts. And so I think it's time to put net metering to one side and focus on some of the other outrageous things that are going on, including a whole bunch of cases that the PUC is refusing to decide.
Thanks, Don. Your last point about priorities that are greater than solar, I don't disagree with you. In fact, I think one thing the state is missing is in terms of getting ready for the revolution within the electric utility industry, whether it be solar. Go ahead.
Well,
Sorry.
I just want to clarify. I,
Please.
I I do think solar is important.
Yep.
And Joe, as you know, the electric co-op put in a giant solar array in Molten Borough. I thought that was great.
Right.
And I'm sad because I spend time in Vermont, and Vermont, the countryside is just littered with big solar arrays. And we should have them in New Hampshire too. But that's different than net metering, I think.
Yep. Yep. No, I think that one of the things we're missing in this state is getting ready for the revolution that will be occurring within the utility industry. Right now, whether it's energy efficiency, whether it's demand response processes where people actually reduce their demand at the point of use, whether it's, again, energy efficiency, additional clean energy resources on the grid. Right now, our grid, in its basic form, was invented by Nikola Tesla. And all the components he put in place are still working for us today. So we're working with a utility system with maybe a little few computers thrown in that was designed almost 100 years ago. So we need to really also make progress on modernizing the grid so that we're ready for what's to come in the future.
Exactly, Joe. That is more important than whether we're going to pay 33 cents a kilowatt hour for net metered electricity.
Absolutely. And just the distribution system itself can be improved because we lose 3 to 6% of the power we put in doesn't come out the other end. It's lost in resistant losses, and that can be improved. And there's no incentives now for that to take place. So, next question. This will be we'll start with Bob. Is there any prospect, if any, for meaningful legislation this year on net metering, grid modernization, holding the line on the RPS standard, or any of those legislation like that? What do you think?
Well, I think that question really should go to Kat because she's in the legislature this year and I'm not. And I think she kind of answered that question when she said that the committee minority is not working on a lot of bills because they know that they've got real tough sledding with these bills. And there's been a bunch of retained bills that they'll have to deal with too. So I'll be quick on this one, and I'll let you turn it over to Kat or Don as you prefer.
I'm trying to sequence through the speaker so everybody gets a chance.
I understand that. I appreciate it.
So Don, I think I know what you're going to say, but go ahead and say it.
Okay, well, let me see if I can surprise you then, Joe.
Please.
I think the key, and Kat kind of said this before, the key is look at the way House Bill 315 went down. That was a horrible bill because it was drafted by Eversource. Eversource took the bill draft, handed it to Representative Vose and said, please introduce this. And he did. But the bill that emerged at the other end, which has to do with community power aggregation, was actually a okay bill.
Sure.
And I think the key to that was Cliff Below. And Cliff Below's method of operation, and he's done this for decades now, is he is relentless. I mean, Cliff just doesn't go away. And he's not rude. He's just incredibly persistent. So he will just keep pressing people like Representative Vose with information and advocacy until Representative Vose, in effect, cries uncle. And I think that is the key to success when it comes to climate favorable legislation in the current legislature. And I think the other thing to keep in mind is that, and I'm trying to stay nonpartisan here. The other thing to keep in mind is that we have a bicameral legislature. So there is a Senate. And even if you are a rabid Democrat who bleeds totally green, there are members of the state Senate who will listen to your arguments and take them into account. You guys can name them as well as I can. But I just think we have to remember that ST&E on the House side is very important, but it's not the only game in town.
Right, absolutely. And Kat, your turn.
Yeah, not the only game in town here.
I
had a whole bunch of different thoughts, but what we started saying is that we are not heavily ambitious for the next sector. That doesn't the next session rather. So all our bills were put in by yesterday. All our LSRs will be coming out. We'll be able to modify them before we start the session again in January. But I didn't mean to indicate that we're not filing bills, because we are filing bills on a lot of significant things. And to Don's point, community power was an exception where we worked the process. And I think Cliff's response, I think the clean energy sector's response when they saw what Eversource had put in HB 315 was hell no. So that was the hell no response. They came out hard and looked at the bills that were coming in the year and said, these are our priorities. We need to work like hell on these to make sure that they are improved if they're going to go through, or stopped. And I think there is an acknowledgement, and we do have folks on the Republican side who are energy conscious legislators or more moderate legislators that we can work with when bills go through the House, because it's a very small majority that the GOP have now. And just this week, it was splashed all over media that Dr. William Marsh became a Democrat and has joined our caucus because of the anti-vaccine and the anti-mask folks. He just couldn't take it anymore. He was demoted from his job as a vice chair, so on Department of Health and Human Services, or on HHS, tongue twister, in the House. So I think there's starting to be a little bit of a chasm there, and energy and the economy and the environment are still issues that resonate with some of these representatives. They're not always going to be in lockstep with a party position that says we can keep ignoring it and just yell taxes, and that's going to be okay with the people of New Hampshire. I did want to say one thing about a bill that Don and I worked on, and that Bob assigned me to the subcommittee on way back when in my first session in 2019, the statewide energy data platform, or what we call the data hub, the energy data hub, which passed and in the House and Senate and got signed into law. And then part of that law was saying that there had to be an adjudicative proceeding at the PUC to determine how it would go forward and if it should go forward. And all of that went through to a settlement agreement. So the wheels of how big things get done, they do turn, and they do slowly turn in favor of progress. When you talk about time of use, demand, energy efficiency, things we can manage those things better if we can see them. And so in a data age, in an information age, New Hampshire still is leading because we had a stakeholder process with people in the state, people out of the state that were interested in seeing states get faster and better at managing their energy. It was a fascinating process. It was an excellent process. The utilities were involved. Everybody was singing the praises of this thing when we went to the two then PUC commissioners, one of whom has left and been replaced. So we still have only 2 commissioners out of 3, and we are still waiting for some kind of response on that. The reason I bring it up is this is a critical linchpin to the state being able to advance its energy future. And Dawn and I and others are going to be speaking on a panel at the local energy solutions conference that Clean Energy puts on October 8th, little plug. But that could easily be killed by this newly forming Department of Energy, which is mostly, any of the announcements around the Department of Energy have been political appointees, people with no background in energy or environmental. So lots of concerns about the reformulating PUC, the reformulating site evaluation committee, which Michael Vose just announced the other day in a meeting, is going through a significant reorg. And I'm like, how does he know that? So there's a lot of gamesmanship going on. And marginalizing of people who actually are qualified for those jobs. So I wanted to put that out to this group because it's contextualizing around what is actually happening in the government that will create impediments, stonewalling, and much like what the cigarette industry did, if they stall progress, any progress delayed is profit improved. I just made that up, but that's the way I look at it.
I'll write that down.
Yeah. So that is my concern, is that there is an element of that also happening. It is by design that we're not getting somewhere, and that people are being put in place. The legislation in HB2 that reconstituted a Department of Energy that had been eliminated, held at bay, turned into a little teeny department that didn't do anything on climate, that was putting out 10-year energy strategies that also didn't really talk at all about climate. The Department of Energy also is being constituted without any mission or mandate or discussion of climate. So that is what you have to understand about the non-strategic elements in our government. There's nobody to go to. And that was the reason that Bob chaired a commission to look at, do we need a Department of Energy? The governor's people at the time that were on that commission came back and said, nope, nothing to see here. We do not need a Department of Energy. Then the following year, they shoved it in the budget and said, now we're going to have a Department of Energy. And each time these things happen, each time there's been a move by this governor to do climate kabuki, there's no mention of climate. There's no urgency. There's no goals. So as long as we're in that situation, you're not going to see anything substantive or real. And so that is my concern for, Don and I talk about this all the time, the statewide energy data platform. He's like, well, the governor signed it, so he's probably going to be supportive of it. I'm like, well,
oh, you naive kid, Don. You know, Kat, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but the only piece of that you omitted, that you really shouldn't be allowed to omit, is I drafted the original data platform bill. I had Martha Fuller Clark introduce it when she was in the Senate, and I watched that bill die what looked like to me like a slow, painful death on the House side. And what saved it is Bob Backus, visionary guy that he is, had the audacity to take a freshman legislator, Kat McGhee, and put her in charge of the subcommittee that was going to wrestle with that bill. And Kat, in part by baking muffins at and presenting them at a strategic juncture, like, she saved that bill from oblivion. And now we're going to get that data platform if it kills me. Now, you can't see data like you can see the solar panels on your roof or your backyard, but it's really important. And it is through the skilled legislating of Kat McGhee that we're going to get there, because she is the hero of that story.
Oh, that is very sweet. That is very sweet. I think the way I try to say it in a nutshell is, you can't manage what you can't measure. And if we want to get somewhere quickly, leveraging the local control model that is popular in New Hampshire, then we're able to move forward by saying, we are going to have a distributed model whereby you can have self-determination around how efficient your house, your plant, your municipality is, right? We're going to give that to the people. And I think one of the things that was envisioned, which is kind of cool, is if we create a standard around how the data comes in, then any new technology that comes along can also feed its data in. So it will just be energy data. So it will be agnostic, and you'll be able to roll it up and look at it and manage it. And that can have incredible impacts on how quickly New Hampshire could move forward. And a lot of other states were looking at what we were doing. And we did have a man who stayed with the whole process, Michael Murray from out of state, who had experience in other states. And he actually testified in the settlement hearing with the PUC that the process that New Hampshire underwent was the right way to do it. And that we were more thoughtful than any other groups he had worked with at coming to basically a set of requirements that we could hand off to build the thing. So it was an excellent process. And I am very worried that the people who are now going to be in charge of it have no insights as to how it was arrived at, and no investment in the fact that it would be of value to New Hampshire. So I'm just worried about the thinking of the people who have that platform's fate in their hands.
Right. Well, Kat, I think data is everything. And I think also we're falling behind the rest of the states in terms of data from the customer level to the utility level in terms of having basically smart meters.
Yeah.
I know there's been lots of controversy about the cost and what they actually provide, but they actually give the data not only to the customer, but to the utility of the operating company in terms of how to manage the platform and their utilities distribution system in the most efficient way possible, and sets us up for the future much better.
So I just want to say, with respect to the data platform, because there's a question in the chat about it, this is one of the 3 big dockets that the PUC has refused to act on. There is a settlement agreement that allows that data platform project to move forward to its next stage of development, but the PUC has refused to act. It's refused to act on that. It's refused to act on grid modernization, and it has refused to act on the triennial energy efficiency plan. This is a regulatory fiasco and scandal, and really, people should be marching on the Bastille with torches and pitchforks. Seriously.
Bob, go ahead.
Can I just add one thing? As Kat reminds us, we need to see how this bill establishing the creation of a data platform, how that's actually going to be implemented. Same goes for the new Department of Energy. I was an advocate of setting up a Department of Energy, and my principal reason is I saw the PUC was not really interested in enforcing the goals and policy goals we have already established by legislature for, energy efficiency and renewable energy. They just didn't want to put much weight on that in any of the things they were deciding. So it seemed to me that if we had a Department of Energy, that could be an agency that could be an advocacy for this. And, we still don't have a commissioner nominated to be the head of that department. So that's really something to watch out for. And some excellent candidates among this group we have right here. And I think, I understand a lawyer I know and Don knows named Tony Roisman just decided to throw his name in by sending a resume to the governor of Vermont. And he got appointed. So, I think we should use the considerable tool that you've given us, Joe. And I particularly want to thank Donna and Susan for all the hard work they've done to put this together and provide us with this tool we've got, and we should definitely use it. And there's one place you might do it. And by the way, the new energy strategy, the last edition of it was a total fiasco, total disaster, is being updated. There are going to be comment periods. I'm sure lots of us are going to weigh in on that. Last time they didn't pay much attention to the comments. For the vast majority of them, it's still worth doing.
The governor asked for resumes at the executive council meeting last Wednesday. He is having trouble finding an energy commissioner. And yet there are, as Bob just said, lots of qualified people who are right here in this very meeting. One idea might be to appoint Joe Kwasnick, the shadow energy commissioner.
Are you trying, Don, are you trying to destroy my marriage? I don't know what you're doing there, but I think we need to close up this discussion. Thank you all. I actually have one more question. How do we get people like the BIA and industry to start to support these measures? It would seem to me that it would be in their best interest to really support a thriving energy community within the state of New Hampshire. Bob, what do you think?
Well, I think, we do have a progressive business group to support good energy policies. They don't seem to have anywhere near the clout that the BIA does, which is unfortunate. But I think if you know businessmen who are running progressive entities, and we have many excellent ones in New Hampshire, you can name them as well as I can. We have some very fine companies that are doing an excellent job in their own energy efficiency programs and, getting on with renewables. If those people could be urged to get active with the BIA and asked to be appointed to their energy committee, maybe we could turn this around so we wouldn't have the BIA being the constant ultimate opposition of so many of these things. And as I say, it should be energy efficiency is good for all customers. It reduces your use and reduces your bills. So it should be an easy argument to make. And that's my suggestion.
You know, if you're worried about the BIA, and you should be, don't let the state's utilities off the hook. They occupy key positions on the BIA executive committee of the board of directors. And, you know, the utilities, when I talk to them, they're all like, oh, Don, we love energy efficiency. We're doing such a good job deploying it. But I think they have the ability to force the BIA to adopt a more enlightened attitude about energy initiatives. And I think it speaks volumes that they aren't succeeding in doing that. And the BIA is about to appoint a new executive director. So this is
Right.
a pretty key juncture there.
All good comments. I'm afraid we have to close out this session. I am absolutely overwhelmed with the conversation that happened today, not only among our panelists, but also the questions coming in from our audience. So thank you so much, panelists, for coming aboard today. And thank you to our attendees today for the wonderful questions. So I think we're
Thank
going to be
you,
going.
Commissioner Kwasnick.
Thank you for doing this.
Oh my God. I'm getting myself into big trouble here.